In Texas, Alex Jones.
Scienceandpublicpolicy.org is his website, and it is excellent, chock full of key, real hard data. Lord Christopher Monckton, 3rd Viscount of Brenchley, of Monckton and Brenchley, and he was a UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's one of his chief policy advisors, so many other important positions. He has since been a director of his own specialist consultancy company, giving technical advice to corporations and governments. And he is also an award-winning researcher. But rather than go over his lengthy pedigree and amazing research, let's go directly to Lord Monckton, joining us from the United Kingdom. Sir, it is wonderful to have you with us.
It's grand to be with you.
Amazing. We've got you for a full hour. Our listeners are just absolutely in ecstasy right now because you and your clear, straight, piercing voice and intellect have been one of the main people just annihilating these frauds. It's good to have you with us.
Well, flattery will get you everywhere. You can get up off your knees now, take off the white gloves, and you no longer need to touch your forelock.
Well, I don't want my children to be slaves to the UN and a global government tax, and so I got to tell you, sir, we popped champagne last week when it came out those emails were real, and I would imagine you were popping some champagne.
Well, we've been following the people named in these emails for years. We thought they were linked, and of course these emails establish exactly how they were linked. And it's very, very interesting because we had suspected there were just about 24 people who, round the world, mostly this side of the Atlantic and in America, who were putting this global warming scam together and actually driving it, rather than doing what the likes of Al Gore and the politicians do, just drifting along with it because they don't know any better. These are the people who have known all along that there isn't a problem. And they've been bending the data and admitting to each other they've been bending the data for the sake of concealing the fact that their data are no good.
Absolutely. And I mean, this really proves a conspiracy here, doesn't it? You have called for the prosecution of the climate criminals. You were the first. Now many other representatives from Australia to the United States are calling for criminal investigations.
There's going to have to be a criminal investigation by the Information Commissioner, whose job is to make sure that publicly available information is available to the public, and that officials like these creeps in the Climate Research Center and their colleagues all over the United States as well were prevented from hiding, destroying, tampering with, shuffling away the data which we paid for, and it therefore belongs to us. And they used a series of excuses. They said, well, there's a Data Protection Act. They said the data belonged to other countries' weather bureaus. Hey, this is weather data. It's not a state secret. They were trying to say that they were emailing each other. They were saying, we are not going to give this data to anybody. They were even saying they wouldn't write any learned papers for journals which required, as part of the peer review process, that all the data and all the computer code and all the intermediate calculations should be shown and archived so that other scientists could check it. They were determined that other scientists shouldn't be allowed to check their work because they knew that they were simply making things up. These people are financial fraudsters. They took at least $20 million that we can trace in recent years in so-called grants for so-called scientific research, and they did it on the basis of a financial and scientific fraud. So they should not only be locked up for concealing and destroying data that had been requested under the Freedom of Information Act by other scientists, they should also be locked up for financial fraud and international racketeering.
Well said, sir. We're going to come right back after this quick break with a long segment, and I would like to blow by blow get your detailed knowledge of this, some of the history, who these people are, what their bigger goals are, and then specifically right through ClimateGate, all the different sectors of fraud that they have engaged in, like covering up the FOIA request, persecuting scientists, colluding to persecute people, which is racketeering, which is extortion, fraud, grant fraud, and now they're 8 o'clock in the evening over in England. He's waiting to have dinner with his lovely wife, so we're going to keep Lord Monckton another 4.5 minutes. His website is scienceandpublicpolicy.org. Our websites are, of course, Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. and I cover the global green takeover in my film, Fall of the Republic, free on YouTube and Google. Millions and millions of views in this and the Obama deception. Show it to everyone you know. Just because you are awake and aware doesn't mean your friends and family are, and people are now ready to hear the truth. In the last 4 minutes that we have left, sir, you have the floor, recapping ClimateGate, where we go, Copenhagen, the nature of these people. Lord Christopher Monckton.
Science, very briefly. We now know by direct measurement that these consensus computer models, all of which had been tuned deliberately, as we now know from the East Anglia one, to show and save and demonstrate the same results, these models are all wrong. The outgoing radiation that was supposed to be trapped by the greenhouse gases down here, so it wasn't getting out to space, is getting out to space. We've measured it from a satellite for 20 years. It's getting out to space just as much as it always did. And so the warming effect of extra CO2 is tiny. You're looking at maybe a quarter to half a Celsius degree over the whole of the next 100 years. That's the science, and that's by measurement. That's not a question of consensus. It's a straightforward measurement, and the consensus has been proven wrong in a paper published by Professor Lindzen just a couple of months ago. We also now know that even if there were a problem, nothing we can do about it, because we're only emitting enough to put up the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere by 2 parts per million of the whole atmosphere every year. That's enough to cause, even on the UN's exaggerated estimate of CO2's warming effect, that will only cause less than 1/25th of a Fahrenheit degree of warming per year. So all those people who say we've got to save the planet immediately or we're doomed in 10 years, it's rubbish. Even if the UN were right, which we now know by measurement it isn't, there's nothing we can do about it short of closing down the entire world economy permanently. And so there's no point in taking any steps whatsoever to mitigate CO2. It's far better to adapt to any change in climate, whichever way it goes, and it's going to be 50-50 whether it gets warmer or cooler from now on, even if we do nothing. And the correct policy to deal with the non-problem that is climate change is to have the courage to do nothing except to prosecute and indict and imprison for a very long time the fraudsters and racketeers from Al Gore to the people at the University of East Anglia who have been making their fortunes at the expense of taxpayers and the little guy paying extra for his electricity to pay for all these useless windmills. We, the people, have now got to rise up worldwide, found a party which stands in every country for freedom, and make sure that we fight this bureaucratic, communistic, world government monster to a standstill. They shall not pass.
Lord Christopher Monckton, in the minute and a half we have left, it is a godsend, your work for the last 20 years fighting these people. It's a godsend what Ron Paul's been doing. So many others are now speaking out against this tyranny. And we're now seeing that we can have victories against these people if we stand up. But this is the key juncture with Copenhagen. We must do everything we can, calling into local talk shows, letters to the editor, calling Congress, supporting you when you go to Copenhagen. Because if we defeat them on this, does this not deal a substantive, perhaps even death blow to this global government tyranny?
I think what we're going to have to do is to close down the United Nations. I was talking to a very senior former UN ambassador the other day in Canada, and he said to me, and I was quite surprised coming from him, he said, I no longer see any purpose in the UN. It exists only to enrich itself at the expense of the nations it claims to serve. It's time it was brought to an end. We would all save billions if we shut down the UN and just about all of its hideous bureaucracies.
And it's a criminal, it's a criminal menace. It must be dealt with. I agree. Abolish it. Arrest the criminals. Charge them. Lord Christopher Monckton, thank you so much. scienceofpublicpolicy.org. God bless you. Godspeed. We salute you.
And God bless America.
Take care, my friend. Amazing.